So I'm just going to say a couple words about what we do here. We are an 18-year-old nonprofit organization. We have mentoring and education programs for youth, both here in Venice and further afield. We do documentary programs. We also do workshops for adults. Our gallery and public programs largely focus on photography and documentary film. The current exhibition is called Shipping and Receiving: Letters and Photographs Between Venice, California, and Newcomb, South Dakota. The front part of the gallery, the Double Exposures, is a project where youth here in Venice, in our mentoring programs, took photographs and sent film across the country to youth in South Dakota on the Cheyenne River Reservation, where they were, the film was double exposed in the cameras of their peers. So they also sent letters, which are represented in the books on the wall, and the book is available for sale, and the proceeds will help us travel the exhibition to South Dakota in the fall. So, and then the rest of the gallery is also work from youth in South Dakota previous to our collaboration. If you have any questions about the exhibition, if you'll get a chance to see it at the end of the program, if you didn't before we started, I'd be happy to answer them. Or if you have any other questions about what we do here. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Matthew.
All right, well, thank you very much for showing up. I'm Matthew Millan, although Millan sounds a lot better. But the last several months have been a very, very interesting time for me. I spent about 6 weeks in Libya, and it's something it's very hard to describe. It's like the age of heroes that's going. Not to be hyperbolic in my verbiage, but some of the most extraordinary things that happened, or I've seen from the very events that led to the revolution, the 42 years of absolute oppression that you cannot imagine. It's unfathomable what you see there. These levels of oppression are really like from King Mithridates upon us, or something from 2,000 years ago. Gaddafi was like a self-styled god king. And the fact that these people, for over 42 years, finally in 2011, the pressure cooker, and the top just came off. And they crossed the threshold of fear and they've never looked back. And this film I'm about to show you, entitled "We Win or We Die," is about their story in the first 4 days. Manifested particularly in the actions of one man, who really encompassed the very spirit of this revolution. And without further ado, I'd like to play the film, and then we'll have a Q&A afterward. And then after that, I will show you a slideshow where I'll take you through my journey through Libya and the amazing things that I've actually seen there. And so can you please begin the film? But I really wanted to grab the emotion of what this man Mahdizu did, because in the West we think of suicide bombers as them, the enemy, something that to spread terror to all of us. But what compelled me about this story, this is one of the tipping points that made me go to Libya, was this man saved thousands of lives in his action. Because at some point, I'm pretty certain that the Katiba would have fallen, because everybody, they had crossed the threshold of fear. It was crossing the Rubicon, as they would say in Caesar's days, and there was no going back. There were people that were doing this, walking and just taunting them with the anti-aircraft gun bullets like this. They were getting torn to shreds. They didn't care anymore, because they knew, one guy said it, if we go there, we're dead, but if we go back, we're dead also. And what they're really referring to is, I'd rather die in the battlefield than get picked up and, 4 in the morning somewhere and then disappeared, tortured first. And this act that Mahdizu did was, he gave up every relationship he ever had. He was a 49-year-old man. He gave up, I'm human, and it really emotionally affects me, just that, because it makes you think too, what threshold do we have within us to cross that? So every day, if you saw where his balcony, you can see every day these young protesters just getting torn to shreds. and just with ruthless force. And it's just, the story is so compelling. It's really a David versus Goliath. And there's no other compelling way to put it. And I'm going to start allowing questions. So, anybody have questions?
What was your relationship to Libya? What compelled you to go there, and how long were you there making this video
Okay.
or film?
What compelled me to go was my friend Hamuda, who's been an LA resident for 36 years. He's also the son of one of Libya's greatest revolutionaries who fought against the Italians, a guy named Ali Bashi. And Hamuda, after Benghazi fell, he never thought he'd see Gaddafi gone in his lifetime. So he had to go down because he's Libyan. He had forgotten he was Libyan for 36 years. And so one day we were having coffee, he said, "We're going to Libya, Matt. Do you want to come along?" And I said, jokingly, "Yeah, I'll consider it." But then he was dead serious, and then I went to my brother's bachelor party in Vegas. I was looking around and I was saying, I think there's something more than this. I'd rather take my chances in Libya. And so I took off, I did a fundraising for less than a month. By April, I was crossing the border. And it was that quick. And I was absolutely terrified until I crossed the border. Then it was another day at the office. But I was there for about 5 weeks.
What did it cost, and what were the difficulties in traveling to Benghazi?
Oh, immense difficulties. The cost was a few $1,000s. The difficulties were actually getting out of Italy. That was the main difficulty. Libya was the easy part.
You flew into Italy.
I flew into Italy, and then got a plane to Cairo, and then we had to take a very long, harrowing journey by road. And that was the scariest part. Was actually I walked into a minefield. I saw a car bomb. What frightened me the most was being on those roads, particularly Libya, because they go very fast. In terms of Back to the Future, it'll be about 1950 right now.
What did you have to do to cross the border? What did the Egyptian guards do?
The Egyptian guards looked at my passport, and the Libyan guards looked at my passport. Please, going the other way was difficult. Getting out of it, we waited about 6 hours. The Egyptians didn't want to let us in. The Libyans were a little wary of, particularly Libyans coming in, because Gaddafi, part of the fifth column, which is what the agents, the moles are called, they had been flooding through and going to Benghazi to wreak havoc. And I'll talk a little about that more, but any more questions regarding the room back? Okay?
What did you shoot on? What kind of camera did you use? And was it just you, or did you have a small crew with you?
I was the crew, but then every Libyan wanted to help out. I used a Canon XH8-1, but I was given 750, maybe a terabyte of footage from people.
And was that compiled footage from random civilians?
People would just come up to me on the street. A lot of the shots of Mehdi Zoo were from his buddy Abdul, the one with the mustache and the bald. He's a good friend of my friend Hamuda's, and he was nice enough. He was a huge help, and he was nice enough to give me the footage. And then Ibrahim, he was one of the young protesters with the beard. He supplied a lot of footage, and he was basically my go-to guy for pretty much everything. He got me everywhere. He got me right next to the front lines. He got me into a minefield. That wasn't his fault. And he was an immense help. And I'll just say quickly, these relationships I forged with a lot of these people were absolutely incredible.
Are you in touch with them? Yeah.
Constantly. They keep on
Is
yelling.
the internet working? Are they seeing your edits or something?
Yeah. They do every once, they're on and off. The internet's not very good, but I'll get emails, particularly from Ibrahim. I talk to him on the phone still. It's very difficult to get a hold of him, but I'm still doing that. I was supposed to be back by now in August. I promised everyone that, so I'm getting a lot of, where are you? And
Where are you? What's going on? Are you going?
I'm going back.
Just gotta raise funds.
If I have to take a camel from here today.
Yeah, this may be a difficult question because I really like the idea you're going for Sundance. And if you can make the kind of publicity you'll get from this will be really important, the kind of distribution you'll get. But some of this stuff could be really useful right now as it goes up on YouTube. I've been involved in a lot of political struggles with people in this country around, particularly the whole question of the beginning of the struggle there. You get a lot of people say, you know, as far as I'm concerned, they had guns from the beginning, and they all just a bunch of CIA or working for NATO, which obviously is bullshit.
Well, I get that quite a bit, actually.
I know, you'll get that quite a bit, right? And this is a great tool for
That's why I was
so
compelled
that
to do
is
this.
complete bullshit.
Because I've been called a war tourist. I'm checking under my car every day now because of some Gaddafi sympathizer mails.
Hey, listen, that is not too far from you. You know the Nation of Islam, right?
Yes.
And the fruit of Islam should be taken seriously, and their connection to Gaddafi should be taken seriously.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing that I really want to do the face. These people, and the Arab peoples in general, put up with 30 years with Ben Ali, over 30 years with Mubarak, 42 years with Gaddafi. These guys are nothing but thugs. And these are, my argument too was, actually it's a very Western argument in the sense that I'm arguing that this is what should have happened toward the end of the First World War. The colonialism evolved and changed into something else. And this is what's being reaped across the Middle East now. This really should have come to a conclusion over almost 100 years ago, but the British and the French in particular betrayed the Arabs who fought with them to destroy the Ottoman Empire's yoke on the Middle East. So, and that's really when I get it. It's not giving people credit. And you see the faces of people. You see the pain that they go through. Those poor daughters, Sajida and Zahor, I mean, they're never going to see their dad again. And how we paint the Arab face in the West is this boogeyman, this unfeeling boogeyman, which all you have to do is go meet them. I'll explain this in a little bit, but I went to these supposed Islamist hotbeds, and I was there when bin Laden was killed. Nobody cares. There were a few people that were upset because that bin Laden knocked them off the front page. And that was what they were most upset about. So, any more questions?
I have a question about when we met to kind of talk about the program, you were telling me about projects that people gave you with the idea that, like, here, get this out so that people can see it. And I think it's so important that you're doing that. And how do you negotiate, Charlie is so much, it's like, how do you negotiate what to use, what not to use? What are you going to do with the footage that you're not using in your film? Do you have plans to kind of make that available in some way, or it's such a heavy responsibility to be given, you know?
It's also emotionally exhausting to watch it. It really is. I've noticed that my mood over the last couple months has been a sine wave. And a lot of it is down to just continually watching this footage. And then being back in LA and seeing my problems here, and how the people there, what they're doing is magnified 1,000-fold. And for me, to magnify my little problems is not like it really takes a heavy toll. And I really do plan to get the footage out as much as possible because I want people to really see what the face of it is. You know, I don't know where this get lost, but humans are humans. And these people are exactly what we want. Exactly. And to see someone like Mahdi Zoom every day, that has to touch people. How can it not? You have to be a very cool person not to be touched by that. I mean, with mass judgment like that, but when I heard the story, I was just in tears. Every time I see that, because I was there during that last interview when I kind of the bomb I dropped at everybody. is that interview with their daughters. I was, if you notice my camera movement, I did not know what to do. I was just like, should I film this? What should I do? And the emotion was just pouring out. And Hamuda, my friend, he was trying to get the emotion out of him, but he just dropped a carpet bomb on everybody, what he said. And it just destroyed the room. And when we tried to bring the girls back, tried to ask them to tell a funny story, but that was it. They were silent after that. It was the most difficult interview I've dealt with. Anyway, any more questions?
Just on what you were just talking about in terms of dealing with the footage, what works for me, living in Venice, is the ocean. And living in Venice. I did a documentary on the Vietnam War, just finished it a couple of years ago. So I dealt with a lot of some same kind of footage, very gory, very hard to deal with stuff. And what worked for me was 3-4 times a day, take a break from the editing, walk down, sit by the ocean for a while, gather my thoughts, have some pleasant thoughts, then get back to the gory details. The question I have, it deals with a rather complicated subject that I need to get into because I need to write something on, and that's the question of racism in Libya. As you probably already know, a lot of the pro-Gaddafi forces have been pushing this view that the opposition is really racist and the mercenaries aren't really African mercenaries, that they're attacking them because they're black-skinned. And I don't really believe it, but I think this has been it's been a very effective line for Gaddafi people, particularly within the Afro-American community. And this is one of the things that Cynthia McKinney has been pushing in her pro-Gaddafi tour around the United States.
They're half correct.
I would like to know what the truth of that is, and maybe get with you later on, because half correct, I know there's some history there.
Well, I'll just explain quickly that there is some racism that I didn't see much of it. I just heard anecdotes about it. I didn't see much of it. I remember there's this one African kid there, they used to call him Obama. That was the worst.
Yeah.
And, but they were good friends, they were good buddies with him, and he liked it. But there were plenty of stories. A lot of it, though, was Gaddafi, over the last several years, has shipped a lot of Africans in with this. One of the purposes is to overwhelm Southern Europe with immigration. But he's offering them a much better life than what they had. He's paying them very well.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Sometimes he was using French francs. And this is 2011, and he paid them in French francs. So, well, 12 years ago, it would have been, great money. But one second. The racism is being manufactured, and it's manufactured because the Arabs have had, especially in Libya, have had strong connections to the Sudanese, to the Somalis, to the people from Chad. They've had interaction with them for hundreds of years. But what's happening is the borders have been flooded with a lot of these mercenaries. So yeah, of course it's going to paint a picture, and racism is going to naturally develop from that. It's been manufactured, the racism. I'm not saying there was no racism before that. I can't speak for that, honestly. I can only articulate what I see. And this is the important thing I need to get across to people. And I can only articulate on what I see. And what I saw there, it didn't appear to be a problem. I heard a lot of anecdotes, though.
So at one point, it looked like there were a lot of women with the rest of the protesters, but during the battles, it looked like it was largely men. So I'm just curious, what was the role of women in the uprising? And
the support structure. The women getting their boys to go out. The women making lunches for them. The women cleaning up the streets, making flags, going out to show their support. Some women braving it, some women getting killed, some women getting raped. And the amount of courage that the women of Benghazi showed was pretty extraordinary. And I wish I could have brought that out a little more, but my footage was fairly limited. Yeah, so I wasn't able to. But they played a vastly important role. And they've showed an iron strength to really be a backbone for the kids who went out. And most of those guys were kids. What I did, I found it interesting. Fawzi was the oldest one, protester. He was about 55. Tawfiq, the one that looked like a James Bond villain, was early 40s. And then Ibrahim was a young guy, 27. And what's interesting, Fawzi was the furthest back watching it. Tawfiq was at the Ottoman garrison, which is right next to the Katiba, hiding behind, getting footage and throwing rocks. Ibrahim was over the wall. If you saw the footage of the camera footage, that he actually goes up over the wall and he's doing this with the camera. And Ibrahim was through the gate right away. When it came down, he was one of the first protesters in. He was just into the breach. And I found that very interesting how that worked out for this too. That it's the age, it's like, how do you describe it? It's like in geology. You know, your parent peeling back the layers, and the top layer is the youngest layer closest to Earth, and then so geologically that kind of interested me how that worked out.
Once they got past the wall, how long did it take the Libyans to take control of the city after from that breach?
Mahdi Zhu crashed into the gate at 4:30. It caused so much fear within the soldiers. I had a lot of footage too of discarded uniform, and most of them left at that point. And Abdullah Sanusi, Gaddafi's right-hand man, had already left at that point as well. And they flooded out, and they tried to blend into the population. So by probably 7 p.m., the Katiba was theirs. And keep in mind that this was pretty advanced weaponry, and the anti-aircraft guns were just tearing it. They'll tear you apart. RPGs, artillery, tanks, several thousand soldiers. The yellow hats, which I will give Gaddafi credit for one thing. He has a real sense of drama. Putting those guys in the yellow hats is something out of some bizarre world. I know the purpose, it served a practical purpose, because, you know, rocks, but it's something very, very bizarre. And something, a lot of that footage is eerie, like the armored trucks going back and forth. With Tawfiq, the guy right next to him, got his leg completely torn off. And they responded right away with brutal force.
So what's going on in Benghazi today, and where's the status of Gaddafi?
They are very much underground. When I was there in early May, I witnessed a car bombing. It was the first car bombing in Benghazi. And I actually got approached. We were walking away from the car bomb, and somebody tapped me on the back. And it's a guy, and he's about 6 feet tall, you know, early 30s in a tracksuit. And he just says, "Today, every day." And then he has his hands in his pockets and walks away around the corner. And that really interested me, because almost every Libyan wanted to be on camera and complain about Gaddafi. There's one guy who says, "Today, every day," and then just disappears around the corner. And there were a lot of soldiers nearby, and that really struck me as odd. I can't say, well, that guy's a Gaddafi mole, but they were around. There were 4 mercenaries that were French. I don't know, this was barely in the news. But I helped a French reporter do an investigative report on this. So these French guys come in, and then this British SAS guy approaches me and says, "Listen, man, you better be very careful right now. Something's happening, and they just killed a French guy. They just killed a French security personnel here." So then I went to it's kind of the intelligence office, because I knew the guy who headed it. And we were in there, and we were trying to determine what happened. And still I don't know exactly what happened, but apparently these guys had been in Tripoli not long before, at least the leader had. And what happened is they came in offering their services to the transitional council as like Blackwater security personnel, mercenaries. And when they did that, the transitional council apparently gave them a carte blanche to do what they wanted. So they went to this Katiba, Katiba means like brigade fortress. So each brigade is called a Kati, I believe. So they went to this Kati called the 17th of February Katiba, and they approached it for weapons. If the 17th of February Katiba they thought something was wrong, so they contact the French consulate, And the French says, you guys beware of these guys. Then one of them has known ties with Gaddafi. So they follow them around, and this is the same day they got there. They find the flat they're in, and they tell them to get out. Well, a firefight happens, and one guy fired a warning shot into the chest of one of the security personnel, which is not a very good tactic for a warning shot. So the guy was accidentally killed. And the other three were, I think there were, it was either 4 or 3, I never got that clear. The other 3 or the other 4 were detained, and then they just put the lid on everything. But what they found in the apartment was diving equipment and maps of Benghazi all over the place. And a lot of these stories were developing. So every time there was a new foreigner coming in, everybody would be kind of, even me. I remember this tall guy named Oliver, a really imposing guy. But at first, he was an American guy, and I was thinking, oh, wonder who this guy's working for. He claims he's a lobbyist, but what's he lobbying? And turned out it was just my fever dream. But we were all a bit paranoid. Now me, because of Hamuda is a big shot in Benghazi because he's his dad, I was pretty well trusted in the beginning. So,
okay, I was just thinking, freedom means, has different values across different landscapes. And how is it defined by the Libyan people if they have conquered the dictatorship of the country? Were you able to, what does freedom mean to them now?
it's a matter of context. Imagine yourself drowning.
Excuse me?
Drowning. Imagine yourself drowning to the very end, losing consciousness. You're just about to lose consciousness. That's it. Suddenly you get pulled out of the water. That's what it's like. Or somebody with a heavy weight stepping on your chest. They're just pushing in, and then they let go.
So now it's the power of the people. So how will they incorporate what it is that they defined as a free?
This is what West of Tobruk, the feature film, is about. Because this is a very, very bizarre, compelling story. What I saw there was out of the dust of this war, a nebula, it was like a nebula of war. It was forming, coalescing into a nation where kids were just out sweeping the streets at 3 in the morning. Media personnel before were taxi drivers. Police were working for free. Everybody was just kind of falling into a role that they didn't even know why. They could not explain why they were falling into such a role. But this has happened. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a beautiful society that won't fall apart. There's still a lot of problems because for 42 years, Gaddafi's infrastructure was oil. That's it, oil. And it was geared around just extracting the oil so he could have his little excursions in Uganda, in Chad, and to wreak havoc on, because he thought he was Che Guevara. I really believe he thought he was Che Guevara, that he was, in his mind, that he was doing the world a great service. But he completely neglected the Libyan people. And Benghazi went on purpose because for 42 years, from the very beginning, Benghazi hated him. The residents of Benghazi could not stand him. There was, I think, 19 assassination attempts in the last 42 years whenever he went there. The residents of Benghazi were just waiting for the moment. And there's no surprise that the people in the east are the ones that rose up. Because also they're, it's like the black hole and you're a little further away from the event horizon. So you're not getting quite sucked in like the people of Tripoli. The people of Tripoli are under serious siege because of the concentration of armor, the concentration of soldiers, concentration of mercenaries. So.
Do they have food, fresh water, sewage? How are the daily, what was the daily life like when you were there? I mean, in terms of basic supplies and basic human needs, were people getting what they needed, or were they in really short supply?
Water is going to be a serious problem very soon because that man-made river has destroyed the South. It's completely dried up the aquifers in the South. Water is not quite as much of a problem in Benghazi, but it's going to become a serious problem because they're taking all the water from the South. Sewage treatment, well, they haven't had functioning sewage treatment there for 20 years. The sewage treatment facility is just collecting dust. basically it's burning the trash in the streets. You're on your own for sewage treatment. That's not to say that there's no infrastructure. There's electricity. So don't get me wrong. I can't say that there was no infrastructure. A lot of this, though, was improved when Gaddafi opened up. And when did he open up? Around 2002, 2003. And why did he open up? Well, he wanted the embargo lifted from him. And then suddenly you had Tony Blair kissing him on the cheek, and everyone forgot about what he did. Oh, he's just an eccentric guy. You know, that Gaddafi, he likes to wear robes. That's what he became. Whereas in the 80s, it was Mr. Lockerbie, the German nightclub on Air France in the early 90s. So suddenly everybody just forgot about that when they saw that Libya was a huge resource to be tapped. And the West carries a big load of blame for enabling Gaddafi, even from the very beginning. I saw one, I'll take one more question. I wanted to show a slideshow if you're interested.
General Yost came over right after the barracks fell, I think, February 23rd, the day after this period. And of course, he was just killed Thursday a week ago. And there are a whole bunch of events kind of surrounding that, a lot of questions surrounding that. There was an attack on a brigade that it turned out to be a Gaddafi cell that apparently had broken some people out of jail, and the uproar around the general's death. I just wanted to get your feeling for what's going on in Benghazi around that now, as best you can figure out. You know, the fifth column's operating there, you spoke a little bit about before, but particularly the stuff that's going on around the death of this general, the assassination of General Yost now. Today they just announced, or was it yesterday, that they're going to have a whole new cabinet, they have a whole cabinet resign.
I talked to my friend in Benghazi about this, two friends we have. They have no idea. It could have been a part of the fifth column. It could have been people that held a grudge against him from the very beginning because he was a Gaddafi guy for 4 years. He was one of the original coup members that overthrew King Idris. He was there at the very beginning. However, now he's considered a hero in Benghazi, that there was mourning him. Thousands came out for his funeral. People just in tears.
Now there's another story that came out about who's originally going over. That said that he had been captured by the rebels on his way to Benghazi, and he announced that his intentions were to come over to the revolution. And they saw the advantage of that, so they went along with it. Do you know anything about that?
I'll tell you, I know about as much as anybody in here that's going on with that. I have absolutely no idea. It's a very bizarre story. Yeah. And there are a lot of angles. There are a lot of ways you could justify in all the ways. It could have been rebels, although they hate being called rebels, freedom fighters. But, so, if anybody, I would like to show a slideshow, and then I just want to take you quickly through my trip, and we'll go from there, okay?
Do you mind if I ask one more question?
Oh, please.
Okay, it'll be quick. Okay, I was thinking, why Libya, why not concentrate your efforts on the disenfranchised domestic here in America?
You know, LA kind of wears on you, and we need a little R&R, so Libya seems like the right place to go. It's because of my connections with my friends. My connections in the Libyan community. And I've been following the Arab Spring very carefully because I'm also a student of history, and I was particularly interested in that. I always thought that there was a big question mark over the First World War, and it was rendered pretty much meaningless when this thing in the Middle East was not solved.
I see.
And this thing was actually, these people were just, have been used. They've also been vilified that they're not speaking out against things like Al-Qaeda, but they are. We just don't have the camera on them. That's the whole thing. These people, especially Libyans, and most Arabs are very middle, moderate, and they don't like extreme attitudes on anything. They love to argue, but that's it. You get a bunch of Arab guys in a court, by the courthouse, they will argue like crazy, but it'll never go further than that because I'll give you a quick example of a lot of the mentality you see. Dog, if I call you a dog, it's an insult. It's a great insult to the Arab. One of the reasons of that is A dog is known for having unconditional loyalty, where you sacrifice your own beliefs and ideology for something else, where you cross those lines of what you find decent for something else, for somebody else. They've had to deal with Gaddafi for 42 years and forced to do that, living in humiliation that they've got a really bizarre leader. And we might be humiliated by our leaders, and probably for good reason. I'm not going to go into political discussion. However, after being in Libya, it's okay. That guy is just out of something 2,000 years ago. Yeah, this is just some virtual reality world that is absolutely, it's absurd. And his ideas, if you read, like the Green Book, one of his main theories is that women go through menstrual cycles and men don't. And I kid you not, this is the Green Book. That's what they had to deal with. That's the Green Book right there. Printed in 19 languages, by the way. So let me at least get to wrap this up by showing a slideshow. Okay? Yeah. And pardon me, I can talk for 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah. So we'll go through this very quickly. She works with me, she knows that. Okay, let me walk through quickly. This is our logo. To state the absolute obvious. So can you put it further? Should just move it a person. Okay, this is when we entered into the port. This is the port of Salum when you cross into Libya. And I won't focus on that, so I just wanted to show you. This is the new Libya. It's very hard to see, I apologize. But notice before, just 6 months ago, this was completely green. Now it's got the red, green, and black.
Can somebody turn the lights down?
Yeah.
Hey Matt, we've opened the back door, so if you can speak up a little bit.
Okay. Okay. Okay, this is in Tobruk. This is some of the art. Part of my documentary will be about the bursting forth. It's a volcanic eruption of creativity. It's just bursting forth in Libyans who didn't even know they were artists 6 months ago. And these are examples of that. And I'll show you some more. These are the fallen. I mentioned briefly the Buslim massacre, where 1,200 Libyan prisoners were massacred with artillery for striking in a Buslim prison in Tripoli. This was 1996. This is one of the tipping points that led to the revolution. Some of these had died during the revolution, the new revolution in Tobruk, but a lot of these were killed. Like these guys were students that were hanged in 1976 for protesting when it started getting really bad. And some of these guys are from the Buslim massacre. And the interesting thing about the Buslim massacre was it happened in 1996. The families didn't find out until 2003 that their family members were dead. And they kept on sending them money and food, and the guards were taking it for themselves. It was a very lovely story. Can you please? More art in Tobruk, and I particularly like this one. It was right next to the bank. So one thing I noticed was there was virtually no looting. The only thing that was looted was the internal security apparatus. The banks were untouched, stores were completely untouched. It didn't even occur to people to loot. And they were looking at footage of Joplin, Missouri on Al Jazeera thinking, wait a minute, why do you guys loot? I don't know. I can't explain. This is the extremist hotbed of Derna. I just wanted to highlight how intimidating it looks. And apparently 52 insurgents came from the city, the Iraqi insurgents. And when I was there, you get no indication of extremism. The people that really resent being called extremists, it really bothers them, really bothers them. I had people just coming up on the street saying, F Al-Qaeda, and F extremists and all that. So, can you please, thank you. This is what they did, pretty much right when the internal security structure in Derna fell, they showed their appreciation to Gaddafi by creating a big bonfire in his honor. And this is what it's like to do. This is my buddy Ali, he was born in Tripoli, but he's lived in England all his life. And he's Hamoud's nephew, and he spent the first 10 days with me, and it was a massive help. And this is about, I wanted to just add this in, just the bizarre experience that it's a little upsetting too, that we hit a dog.
Oh.
And we hit it, and we were all upset about it because we tried to avoid it, but the dog made a tactical change, a tactical decision, and we veered back and got hit by us. And sadly, we were all, I was upset about this, and Hamoud is saying, people are getting torn to pieces with artillery, and you're worried about a dog? But I was a little concerned, but we were dragging along, and then we get to a checkpoint, everybody's pointing at their car, so we get out, and somehow, some bizarre way, the dog's head and shoulder got lodged into the grill. I don't need to focus on that anymore, I guess. So a casualty of me being there. This is the courthouse in Benghazi. This is a picture that I quite like of Gaddafi. They finally, humor is such a great way to tell people how little you like them. And there's a lot of great art featuring Gaddafi that's none too flattering, and that's just one little example. This is my buddy Hamoud and Ali at the courthouse. After they did my first report, and I talked for about 30 minutes longer than I was supposed to in a 2-minute report. This is a training camp. And this guy was demonstrating how to escape. He was actually a soldier, and he switched sides right away. And there's a lot I left out in the Mahdi Zoo story. One of them was a lot of the soldiers, particularly the 36th Brigade, switched sides, and that helped the Katiba fall quicker too. But this was after Mahdi Zoo's thing. So Mahdi Zoo is still considered the tipping point. Okay? I'll just let you read this. This is on the Katiba wall. Can everybody see that fine?
Yeah.
Just to show the unity across the Arab world that the Libyans feel for people in Yemen all the way to Syria. This is one of the turrets that they fired from on the Katiba. Okay, this is what's left of the Gaddafi loyalist cars. They got to work very quickly, fortunately. These are all, I think, these are offices, and then you see barracks. But you wouldn't believe how this whole complex was dismantled, and it was probably 2 miles in diameter, the whole Katiba. And they kicked everybody out in 1979. If you live there, sorry, we're building a base. And there's an Ottoman, a perfectly good Turkish garrison right next door. Completely abandoned, not being used for anything except rats crawling around. This is Gaddafi's house where Tawfiq got to take a leak. This is what they went to work. By February 20th, this thing was lit up like a Roman candle. And they let the world know what they really felt about their brother leader. This is one of the prisons. You see a lot of light in it because that whole wall, one side was completely excavated because they buried the prison and they burnt the bodies of the prisoners in there. And all the residents of Benghazi were desperately trying to get to them. So there's big holes everywhere, them trying to dig to get to these people. This is one of the stages where Gaddafi used to talk. And in the back is just very typical. The only thing that wasn't burnt was the mosque, which I don't think I have a picture of it here. So that is where Mahdi Zoo, I'll show you exactly. So you saw in the animation, the car went from here. Nobody expected this. There were people trying from all angles, but he planned this pretty well. His timing was perfect. And he just went around the corner. He actually put his seat back so he wouldn't get shot. and then he rammed right into the anti-aircraft gun, which caused a breach in the gate over there, it caused a massive explosion. And there is actually footage of that explosion from the distance. And it's incredible footage that I'm trying to get, because you see people saying, he's going for it, he's going for it, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. And then by 7 o'clock, the Katiba was there. That is one of the anti-aircraft gun rounds. This is nothing too, this is a 14.5 millimeter. They have 22 millimeters as well, and this actually went through people. That is somehow got in their place. This is also a training camp. Do you remember the guy in the very beginning holding the sign?
Yeah.
That's him, Idol Ahasi. He's a human rights activist turned general. And he had just gotten shot in the arm. He's training everybody. He's a very peaceful man that was forced in the position of war. That's Mehdi Zero. And this was at a kind of a memorial to commemorate, I think at that point it was 2 months. Or a month, yeah, it was 2 months after he committed his act. And that's his daughter, if we will recognize her, Sajida, and I think this is his wife. That's his daughter, Zahora. And this was before I interviewed him. I knew it was going to be a tough interview. I didn't know how tough it was going to be. This is a Bayda. Bayda is very dear to my heart because it's supposedly one of the extremist hotbeds, but I get there and I was called the Brad Pitt of Benghazi at that point. They had known about me, so they pretty much put the red carpet out for me. One guy made me a wreath. Everybody baked me cookies. I was cold, I forgot my jacket. And this is in the mountains, in the Green Mountains, and it's cold. It was freezing. So a guy gave me his jacket, he wouldn't let me give it back to him. But then the art that came out of it, these are supposedly, the Libyans consider them kind of the yokels. And this is the many faces, the plastic faces of Gaddafi. And I think this represents the Libyans so well because what they're doing is they're peeling off the plastic face of Gaddafi so you can see the true face of the people. And it's a very powerful painting. And that speaks for itself. I just found this one particularly interesting. This is coming from people that, for years, most of these people have never been able to really express themselves. And they're coming up with highly evolved, advanced art. Just shows that the ingenuity of people. That's another one that I quite like. And the Eastern Libyans know poetry. How they speak Arabic is la da 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 da. It's all poetic meter. And so they really get into it. This was a fantastic. I did not know what was being spoken, but it was so soothing and so beautiful. And the people really get into it too. They do their clapping when they like something. They let you know if they don't like the poetry as well. More Libyan ingenuity. That was from a helicopter. So they do a lot of these things. They take the rocket launchers off of helicopters and mount them at the back of the truck. And I just wanted to say, when I came back to LA, I think the worst thing I experienced was I didn't see one truck with an anti-aircraft gun or a rocket launcher mounted to it. And this is like their version of Pin My Ride, basically. It's basically, you get your new rims, except how much cooler is it when you have an anti-aircraft gun? I feel like a 10-year-old kid again. His dad even. When the French performed the airstrikes, the turrets got so hot in the tanks, they literally just popped off.